This episode is brought to you by Pine Melon. This holiday season, let Pine Melon make your Christmas prep simple and stress-free. From fresh local ingredients to holiday staples like lamb racks and ham, they have everything you need to create a memorable feast. Avoid the holiday rush and enjoy the convenience of grocery delivery right to your door. Use code CityCastDenver to get $35 off your first order of $75 or more. Support local farmers and makers while making your holidays brighter with Pine Melon. Just go to pinemelon.com to make your grocery order today. That's pinemelon.com. Today on CityCast Denver. 28 years ago this month, 6-year-old JonBenét Ramsey was found murdered in her family's basement in Boulder. In the decades since, endless tabloid stories, books, news specials, and online discourse has produced countless theories and potential suspects, but ultimately, no killer. A new documentary from Netflix revisits the murder once again and has us wondering, is the true crime treatment doing anyone in Colorado's most famous cold case any good? And just to note, this episode contains discussion of sexual assault and the death of a child, so please take care. Oh, and stick around for our sponsored interview about an amazing nonprofit that's helping people get and stay housed right here in Denver. Today is Wednesday, December 11th. I'm Bree Davies, and here's what Denver's talking about. Producer Paul Caroli, hello.
Hey, good morning, Bree.
Politics and Green Chili correspondent Justine Sandoval, hi.
Hello.
So we watched the JonBenét documentary on Netflix.
All 3 hours.
3 hours?
Didn't realize how long those episodes were before we committed to doing this. And then
I didn't either.
Found out on Sunday. Wow.
So long.
This case, it turns out it's a pretty complicated situation here with this little girl.
I had tuned out for the last 30 years, so.
Honestly, this is my first thing. I had not. I mean,
Consumed
people have
any.
always heard talked about her and this case from the 90s, and I mean, I moved here in 2015, so like I wasn't around. That's kind of what I want to start with you all with, actually, is like, because all I know is what I learned from this documentary. So I'm sure there's like they alluded to a bunch of books and other stories, and everyone's got a theory, but like you two lived through this when it happened in the 90s.
Yeah.
What was it like?
I remember this Christmas morning or the next day after Christmas because my dad's like a news junkie. So he always has the news on like all 5 TVs in the house.
Mm-hmm.
So he like announces all of like these things, and it was a big breaking news story. I kind of like that they're going back and covering all these 90s like cases that went on, like OJ and JonBenét, because I was really young. I was like 9 years old when this happened. So I just observed it from like hearing the news and not really understanding what was going on. So now as an adult to watch it back and like really bring some clarity to like what was going on in the media at the time.
Did you talk to your parents about it? Because I'm guessing that they had a stronger reaction to it. Because like you were being 9 years old, not so far off from JonBenét's age.
Yeah. I was Burke's age. I think he was 9 years old
The
when
older
it
brother.
happened. Yeah, the older brother. No, I just remember we read the tabloids a lot because it just was entertaining.
Sure.
So it was just constantly on the cover of every tabloid. And my parents were kind of outraged with like how sensationalized it was on the tabloids. Like it was really gross.
It was really gross.
Yeah. And now looking back, it's like even grosser than I remember it was then.
That's how the 90s generally feels when we look back at how the news coverage was. Because like I was like 16, I think, when this happened. And I was a daytime TV freak. I watched Ricky, I watched Sally Jesse, I watched Phil Donahue, Rolanda, Lisa, Richard Bay, Jenny Jones. I watched them all. And I watched Geraldo for sure. And what I remember about this case was it was one of the first times that I understood media's role in what gets coverage. Because I think one of the criticisms was definitely children are murdered every day. Like, it's gruesome and terrible, and children are harmed every day. And this story got coverage, like, you know, it was one of those pivotal case. It's like OJ, and I'm trying to think of the other big cases, the Menendez brothers of the 90s. And this was one of those cases. And it was one of those times where I remembered. And also I was on high school newspaper. I was thinking about journalism that I realized the media chooses this sometimes for us. And so I mean, how I felt about it, I have all younger siblings. I had a little sister who in 96 was 2 and 3 years old, a toddler. I had another sibling, and like my siblings are all younger than me. So I thought a lot about that too, as being Burke and how that felt. And I thought about that more as an adult watching this time. I was like, this poor kid's life was wrecked. Not only did he lose his sibling in a really violent way, then he was accused of murdering her.
Yeah.
In the dark, I mean, just the converse. It was so dark. So
although that came much later. That was like a 2016 CBS documentary that made the case that it was the older brother.
Yeah, but I would just say, even if you're older, and I mean, like, I don't know if I've talked about this on the show. I have lost a sibling as a child. I had a sibling die. I saw it happen, and it wasn't violent in any capacity. It was a health issue. But I would just say, if I was in that position, and then 10 years, 15 years later, it was in Burke's position, it would just like wreck me.
Yeah.
It would just wreck me. And so I was very frustrated. I have not followed this since. I willfully had not paid a lot of attention to it because it felt weird to be paying so much attention and how it was being talked about, which we'll get into. But this was my first time sort of engaging with content around JonBenét in the last 20 whatever years.
I mean, it has fully gotten sucked up into what I call the true crime industrial complex.
100%.
And you can see why. I mean, watching this, I like I said, didn't know the details of the case, but hearing them for the first time, learning about how there was this ransom note that the parents found on the stairs, and then shortly afterwards, they went down to their basement. This is all happening in Boulder, Colorado. They went down to their basement and they found their 6-year-old daughter, apparently a victim of sexual assault and murder. And then there's all these details that are conflicting. So like the media in the aftermath thinks it like clearly paints the parents as the guilty folks and then starts talking about how they put her in these pageants and like
there's a lot of demonization around the pageant thing.
The pageant thing is a huge topic. And I
truly did not understand the hysteria around it.
Same. What I got from that was she wanted to participate in these pageants. They were also from Atlanta, so pageant culture. Yeah, it's different there. And I think what unfortunately happens with these pageants is because you were dressing young girls up to look like women, they attract pedophiles. And I think that's this family didn't realize that's what they were doing, but maybe in some way it attracted that type of negative attention. Like in the documentary, the photographer that was at those pageants who was caught like selling all this child pornography, so they demonized them, like they were deliberately putting her in harm's way and they were putting her in like this pedophilia circle when I think it was just very innocent on their side, and because of the national attention, all these photos and videos that were part of their collection just went viral.
The lack of context, I think, is a really great point, Justine, about being from Atlanta and living in Boulder. And Atlanta, this is a much more common thing. And I never thought about that until you just said that. And that makes total sense as to why that got picked up as like hysteria. Because the thing too unfortunately about what I think is now called child sexual abuse material is that it can come from anywhere. And most folks that are producing it accidentally like this aren't thinking about that audience. I think about that all the time with just like, I take pictures of my kid doing all kinds of stuff. What I post on the internet is definitely different than what my family sees. But I saw that part as very disturbing, that not only was it framed as the parents were doing something bad, but the way that her imagery was interpreted by adults. Like the woman in the mock trial.
That brings me back to Geraldo. This was one of the most...
The mock trial.
Like jaw-gaping moments in the documentary.
How many adults signed off? How many producers? How many people in that TV studio said this is a good idea?
At the TV when I remember that, but watching as an adult now, I'm like, what the... Like,
Yeah.
So Geraldo Rivera stages this mock trial. This is like maybe a year or two after the case has happened.
Well, it's
Shortly-
ongoing.
While,
It's like
while the
case is
investigators are
ongoing.
looking for who did this, there's a mock trial, and he brings in these like so-called experts to debate the merits of the various sides of this case. And then you see a clip in this documentary of this one woman who is like, JonBenét, there's this footage. I watched 23 hours of her pageant footage. Why? One.
I know. Okay,
and then
psycho.
and then she's like, and there was this one moment that made me think, oh, of course the parents are guilty of this killing, because you can see her pull out this saxophone, and then for 2 straight minutes and I'm quoting this woman, she
Yes.
says, this little girl was masturbating with this saxophone for 2 minutes. Meanwhile, you're watching the footage, and she's just pretending to play the saxophone.
Again, as a child that has a child
It's
that pretends
ridiculous.
to play instruments all the time, I couldn't believe that was that woman's interpretation, or at least she was willing to say that on television.
Crazy.
And that Geraldo was like, okay, yes.
man,
Yeah.
Geraldo has always been a
Real
a-hole.
slime ball, but this was like, I did not realize what
So
a
gross.
slime ball
This
he
whole
was.
thing is slimy. I mean,
Yeah.
we're talking about how like the pageant stuff attracts creeps and weirdos. I'm sure it does. But the true crime storytelling also clearly attracts creeps and weirdos based on how many people have come forward and taken credit for the killing.
Yes.
Like that was a big part of the 3rd episode
Yeah.
was this guy,
Mark Carr.
Carr,
Oh, what a
this-
disturbing
who
individual.
had a series of phone calls with one of the investigators. I don't know. There's a lot of
He was
a lot of
leading that
white guys involved in this.
Mm-hmm.
Also, uniformly white people involved in the case. Boulder, Colorado. I don't know if that's a factor, but the fact that this Mark Carr guy was like taking credit for this, and all these phone calls of him just being like, "Oh yeah, we loved each other. It was like a romantic relationship." Like disgusting,
Paul-
disgusting. And he was clearly attracted by the storytelling and the coverage and how this story has been framed in the context of just another one of these true crime. It's such a formulaic approach to storytelling, and I find it so exploitative and gross.
But I want to tell you where I saw it the most that just that disturbed me beyond belief. I can't even describe to you how much I wanted to reach through the television and murder that person for talking about a baby that way. But the thing that struck me the most was I know a lot of these reporters that are featured because they were local. Paula Woodward came to my school and did a 9 News Investigates after my school newspaper said we did an investigation into our security guards because we didn't think they were doing their job, and 9 News came and investigated it, and I had a lot of respect for her. And then I watched this documentary, and she did the thing that I can't stand that people in the media do in these true crime stories, which is I'm going to state something as fact, and then I'm going to corroborate it with someone else agreeing with me. So she said something to the effect of like, it was the moment where they said, this is way far in the story, they said that someone reported that the father took JonBenét's casket on his private airplane and flew it to Atlanta.
Right.
That actually turned out to be a lie. That I believe the Rocky Mountain News reported. A reporter reported that. Paula Woodward said, when I heard that, I knew this man was disturbed. And I looked at my husband and he agreed with me. And that was the end of the conversation. And I was like, so an investigative reporter took information that another reporter falsely reported and then corroborated it with her husband. And that was just like the dissolve in the conversation. And that's one of the things those troubles I'm having with true crime is we watch people who have authority state things that they believe are fact. And then that's it. And none of that was like later. To be fair, in that portion of the documentary, they're stating that was not true. But the way that she said it so sure, she was sure of herself. And I thought, I'd really trusted this person as an investigative reporter.
She looks so different to me. That was one of the
I
things shocked me
didn't
the
realize
most
it was
on the
her.
net.
Yeah, I didn't realize it was her.
What? Because I remember her growing up. Like, so,
She did 9 Wants to Know.
yeah.
Justine, talk more about that. The whole like what it felt like to see a story from our community, from Boulder, like people we know get sucked up into this true crime machine.
Yeah, that was interesting to watch too. Now, from the perspective as an adult, like seeing the old footage, seeing the people involved, Mitch Morrissey, like Denver names who were involved that I didn't even realize
RDA
then,
at the time.
yeah, who was involved in these cases. Some of the commentary from the Boulder mayor saying that Patsy Ramsey was creating hysteria basically by saying that there was a murderer on the loose. Like this whole idea too about like this idea of safety in Boulder, like this couldn't possibly be an intruder murder because it's safe in Boulder. And we've only had one murder this year. But there's one thing I know from true crime and all the Datelines I've watched is homicides happen anywhere and everywhere. And no town is safe. But it was just kind of like this smugness from the community. Like, this is Boulder.
Not us.
It's safe here. It has to be the family. It has to be them. And that like complete focus and from like officials from the city of Boulder to the police and detectives, it was really, I think, it was really gross. Another gross thing about
It was definitely gross. But I think that's part of why it worked as content so well for the true crime people, is because like the setting of Boulder, Colorado, what people feel like is this like pristine, bucolic, like it's a small town. It's like a resort, you go hiking, you go skiing. And then there's this horrible murder that happens. Like you can just feel how it fits into this formula that people have for telling these stories.
Yeah. It needs the right backdrop, and it had the right backdrop. But I do find it interesting that the framing was like, this couldn't happen in Boulder. It must be the parents. Was so weird to me. And again, I didn't engage with any of this in the last couple decades, so I've not thought much about it. But watching it now, all I could think was like, this is a family. This was a family that lost a child in a really horrific way. And I don't feel like they got much. There was a lot of, and this happens too also in true crime, is assumptions about behavior. They didn't seem sad enough. There was a moment when the father was in the kitchen looking at the mail, and he looked like he was looking at it flippantly, like he didn't care. And then they flip back to him and he goes, I was looking for something to prove, I was like looking for something to talk to investigators about. I wasn't just looking through the mail, but like assumptions about body language and the assumptions about Patsy Ramsey's behavior and all of these things that, again, I'm rethinking as a parent. I don't know how I would act or react or interact with this information if this had happened to me.
I see a devastated woman. I think that was probably one of the most heartbreaking things. I'm going to cry thinking about it. Yeah. Just watching this woman go through that, and then also her health struggles. Like at that time, she was barely recovering from ovarian cancer. And I could just imagine like the physical, mental toll. She looks devastated to me throughout the whole thing. The whole story is so sad. I remember thinking when she had passed away, I think it was like in the early 2000s, 2006. I felt sad for her then. And there were, I followed the case because it was happening, but I really didn't pay attention like until these things would pop up like that. And I just remember feeling really heartbroken for that woman. And watching this documentary, you just see a woman in agony.
This episode is brought to you by the Office of Climate Action. Whether something needs fixing, you need something temporarily, or you're just looking for the next unique item for your wardrobe, make the choice to reuse. It's just as good as new. Introducing Denver's Reuse Directory, where you'll find all of the Mile High's reuse businesses in one place. Need the sole of your shoe repaired? Take a peek at Denver's Reuse Directory and find a local cobbler. Have a home improvement project to tackle? Check out a tool from one of Denver's equipment rental shops. Heading to a holiday party and need a fancy outfit? Stat? Explore endless consignment and resale stores across the city. All of these resources can be found in Denver's Reuse Directory. Repair it, rent it, buy it used. It's just as good as new. Find your way to reuse and support local businesses at denvergov.org/reuse directory. That's denvergov.org/reuse directory. This episode is brought to you by CAP Management. CAP Management is a Denver-based HOA management company serving townhomes, mid-rises, and high-rises. From staffing, accounting, project management, careful reserve planning, customer service, and more, CAP serves properties that appreciate working with an engaged, proactive team with the expertise to work with the most complex properties. Many of their clients make up the skyline of our wonderful city. CAP is also the only HOA management company with a sustainability mission, dedicated to guiding HOAs in how to operate in a sustainable way, navigating ordinances like Energize Denver and Colorado's Building Performance Program. I'm just thinking about when my mom My mom took over her HOA and got them to install those car chargers. Looking for Brooke to manage your property? Well, she's available. I'm just kidding. CAP is working to envision the future of the HOA industry, like their partnership with the University of Colorado to pilot the nation's first sustainable HOA certification framework. If your HOA is looking for help, visit capmanagement.com to learn more. That's capmanagement.com. This episode is brought to you by Pine Melon. This holiday season, let Pine Melon make your Christmas prep simple and stress-free. From fresh local ingredients to holiday staples like lamb racks and ham, they've got everything you need to create a memorable feast. Avoid the holiday rush and enjoy the convenience of grocery delivery right to your door. With over 200 local farmers, ranchers, and producers across Colorado, Pine Melon delivers high-quality meats, fresh produce, baked goods, pantry staples, and more straight to your door. Skip the crowded stores and let Pine Melon handle the hard part. No subscriptions required, just same-day delivery in a 2-hour window within Denver and Boulder. Enjoy the convenience of grocery delivery with Pine Melon. And don't forget the code CityCastDenver to get $35 off your first order of $75 or more. Just go to pinemelon.com to make your order today. That's pinemelon.com.
I did some reading about how this particular documentary has been received by the people who love this kind of stuff. Like I went on some true crime forums to hear, because there's people who are obsessed with this case. Like I got 10,000 words into like a 50,000 word write-up from someone who's followed this case and knows every detail. But it seemed like the consensus was that this was a pro-Ramsey slant. Like they were trying to give the Ramsey parents side of the story and maybe like exonerate them or like point that way, when the documentary like was saying like, oh, back in the 90s all the media hype was about like how the parents did it, and so maybe we need to reassess. I wanted to hear what you all thought about that narrative.
No, the same thing. Like anyone who watches a 3-part docuseries, I went straight to Reddit and the internet right afterwards to see what everyone else was thinking. I kind of made up in my mind that they were innocent a long time ago. Yeah, I really don't think that the family did it. But then I watched this and it really kind of opened your eyes how the media portrayed the whole thing. And I thought, wow, everyone online must be like on the side of this documentary, but they were not.
Really?
So many people online were like, this was slanted. John Ramsey's just doing this now to get people off of his back. Very much still on the Burke did it bandwagon.
I saw some of that too.
Pineapple stuff.
I mean, I haven't seen the CBS documentary that made the case for Burke, so maybe that was like really persuasive or something. I have no opinion on who did it. I have no idea.
I don't know. I
don't want to be involved.
I believe most children are good, and I just had a hard time ever thinking that a child would do this.
I mean, again, haven't seen the CBS thing, but when I was talking to my in-laws about this, I happened to be seeing a big group of family who also grew up here, lived here around the time, and they all had strong opinions about who did it. But the one person was like, it seems to her like it was an accident. This was like my aunt-in-law who was saying like, it seemed like maybe someone in the family made a mistake, an accident, and then JonBenét died. And I don't know if that squares with any of the evidence about
the stuff and the really grim garrote choking thing and like stuff I can't normally. I can't.
I don't see the motive from
that was my
them.
Struggle too. And I understand maybe from the slanted perspective, we aren't supposed to see the motive, but I genuinely had a hard time understanding why the parents would.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So the other side is, John Ramsey agreed to participate in all of this as a way to bring it back up so they can go do other DNA testing to try to find the killer.
That was the most interesting part to me.
So I'm like, he's advocating to keep searching for this killer. So
that was the interesting part to me, because that didn't show up till the very last episode. In the last like 15 minutes, they were like, DNA things have advanced. We would like to retest some of this stuff. And I thought about all these cases we've seen come forward where someone did their 23andMe and their uncle in California was the whatever killer.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Well, whoever, one of the...
Like Golden State or something.
Golden State.
You know what I mean? And so I was surprised that was something that hadn't been done. I thought that was going to be revealed in the documentary.
When they said that at the end, I was like, yes, duh.
Yeah.
Like,
then let's do that.
The sampling. Yeah, I mean, maybe they will. I know I saw the Boulder police, they have like annual updates on the case now, so they're still working on it in some capacity. And like the other part of the documentary was that some of the investigators, like the family's investigators, have gone to meet with Governor Polis recently to lobby for this kind of thing. So I don't know. I just trust that the system is still working as best as it can, personally.
This
Maybe that's just my skepticism
though.
about the doc. I'm just so like anti-true crime media personally.
Well, but the doc also was kind of saying that the system wasn't working because Boulder didn't know what it was doing. The Boulder Police Department didn't know what it was doing, that they didn't close off the crime scene, that they didn't search the house, that the dad had to find, like...
That was my
But again, I know
takeaway.
now we sound like those people.
No, my biggest takeaway was just rage at the Boulder Police Department and the way they handled the entire thing. Just... I mean, anyone who's ever watched a true doc, a crime doc, anything knows, like, you don't contaminate the scene, like all of these very basic things. I remember people being so outraged by that, like knowing how the Boulder police handled it when they sent the father off to go look around, like,
Which
why?
I thought was so weird.
It was so weird. And then Linda Arndt, the detective, coming out and making that whole interview about how she saw it in his eyes that he murdered.
That's what I'm talking about. That's some of that true crime machine thing where someone gets to say that so matter-of-factly.
Yeah.
When in reality, this is all based on how you conceive
I'm
her.
like, ma'am, you're a detective. You are a professional. You're out here making statements on an active crime.
Uh-huh.
The mayor making statements on an active crime. All of them. I was so mad.
The investigator leaving the case and then writing a book accusing somebody of doing it.
Steve Thomas. I wrote it down here because I was so irritated by
That was, it just, but I guess the question to me is like, why now? Why again? Why relitigate?
I have the most cynical answer for this.
What do you think, Paul?
I hope, it's kind of a Christmas story a little bit.
Timing wise.
And they put it out in December. Like, I just wondered, did some executive at Netflix say like, oh, it's a Christmas one?
Paul, we work in news. This is called a peg. It's a news peg.
Yeah.
We know
Just
this.
like so gross though.
I just figured that's why it came back. I'm like, oh, Christmas.
Yeah.
They needed a true crime
Christmas,
smash for the quarter. And
I mean, it was like
JonBenét.
when I went to click on it, it was like number 5th most watched thing this week or whatever. And I was like, well, here I am being that guy.
Yeah.
I'd much rather be torrenting this from somewhere and not giving a click to Netflix. But because I grew up on this stuff. I didn't continue to enjoy it as an adult. I grew up on Unsolved Mysteries, Dateline, 2020, Hugh Downs and Barbara Walters. I loved that. Keith Morrison. I watched all of that stuff. And watching it this time, I remembered why it's so entertaining. And that's where something I think about is one of my favorite cultural critics, Sarah Marshall, talks about how most crimes are pretty mundane. And so these crimes in reality are not really, people are not this conniving and deep thinking. And like a lot of times it's an accident or something horrible happens, not intentionally. Yeah. And this felt like one of those things where it was like, what has been made up? What has been made out of this versus what the reality of what happened was?
Yeah.
Which doesn't mean a horrific crime didn't happen. A horrific crime happened. We know that. But the intrigue is very...
Who wrote the ransom note? Did the
Yeah.
parents write the ransom
Here's the
note?
2 notepads.
Why is it the same dollar figure that these alleged ransom people asked for that the dad got as a bonus from his job that year? Like, there's little details that kind of make it stand out from the rest.
Yeah, but also you can make, I don't know, I feel like some of that is made to be.
Yeah, maybe.
Making hay out of it. I don't know.
Look closely at these things, you see connections.
I mean, you could say that for literally like any case, though, if you want to.
Saxophone. Look what she was doing with the saxophone.
Or the fact that so something that I did find interesting in the documentary was why were there so many images of her in the news? And it was because a photo company had purchased those photos from the photographer. So they were distributing them. Because I was like, why do we have so many photographs of her when I know the family wasn't like, here's my personal cachet of my child's photos. And so again, these are all components that lead into this thing that creates this true crime, not just the narrative, but a thing that attracts people to continue to follow it.
Yeah, I think seeing her in this documentary is more of a child than all the images we saw of her and like this beauty pageant image kind of made me rethink like watching crime documentaries and contributing to this and thinking back. Like I felt really bad when we were in college. We used to like drive by the Ramsey house, just, like check it out. And
I mean,
people
it's an
would
urban
always
legend,
do that.
essentially.
Totally. And now I think like,
This is a family.
yeah, a family, a child was murdered
A
here.
child, yeah.
Like, horrible, horrible.
I was telling Paul last night after I watched this, I think I checked on Montgomery 50 times in the middle of the night. I couldn't sleep. And I was like, I can't consume this kind of media because it makes me too paranoid about the world. And I don't want to live in a world where I'm paranoid for my child to exist. And I can't imagine what this family has been feeling for the last 30 years. So many hurt people. I don't know. Justine, was there anything else, anything that struck you or anything you wanted to discuss other than your anger? Yeah.
My final
Your
thought.
Jerry Springer's final thoughts?
No, I just think, what was my final thought? My final thought is that this was a really horrific crime that was mishandled by the Boulder police and continued to be mishandled throughout the entire case, which brought us further away from any type of reasonable conclusion for this case. And there's a lot of blame and finger pointing to go around. But at the end of the day, a little girl lost her life.
Yeah.
And we need to think about it like that.
That's kind of was my takeaway, was just like horrific things happen to children every day. And children need to be protected. And wherever they live or whoever, whatever their circumstances are. And that was just the thing I kept thinking about was I don't want horrible things to happen to kids. And it's hard when we have to look at the fact that horrible things do happen to kids. So how we find justice for them is really difficult. It's really tough. And I don't admire anybody that has to be on any side of this because we don't know. And I hope we figure it out one day, but I don't know if we'll ever do that. I don't know if we'll have to have another true crime relitigation for the millionth time at the 50-year anniversary or whatever. Like
that's a guarantee. That's a PK lock. There will be another JonBenét Ramsey documentary.
In the next...
At some point, there will be another one.
Anyway, well, I mean, let us know what you think. I think we were interested in talking about this, but also, it's a fraught conversation, but it's something that we know that resonates, or at least people are talking about in Colorado and so far beyond. So if you have any thoughts on the JonBenét documentary, you can give us a call, 720-500-5418 on the True Crime, I guess, hotline, 720-500-5418. Paul, Justine, thanks.
Thank you.
See you next time, Brie.
And now, please enjoy this sponsored segment from our friends at Warren Village, a local nonprofit helping people in need that could really use your support this holiday season.
Hey, I'm CityCast Content Director Andrea Lindsay here with Ethan Hemming. He's the president and CEO of Warren Village. Ethan, welcome.
Thank you, Andrea. Great to be here.
Warren Village has been supporting single-parent families in Denver for 50 years. Can you share what makes it unique in addressing housing and economic stability?
Absolutely. I think really what makes it unique is that we bring together three distinct forms of support that are essential for a family, a single-parent family, to transition and to really achieve transformation of their life economically and personally. So first, the foundation is affordable housing that's safe. Then we provide services, opportunity, education for the parent. We serve moms and dads, mostly moms, but we provide everything from workforce education to access to community college education. Mental health is super important, especially these days. So everything that adult needs that they identify to really make that transformative journey, we provide here on site. And then we cap it all off with a state-licensed, 5-star quality-rated early learning center that serves kids from 6 weeks old to 5 years old on site that really helps them achieve ultimately what they want to find out in education and success, right? And that's the second gen, right? The little ones. Breaking that cycle of intergenerational poverty really begins with the littlest ones.
So why have this two-generation approach that supports both parents and children with the wraparound service? Like, how does this holistic model help the families achieve a lasting self-sufficiency?
I mean, it's research-based, right? The research shows that the best way to help someone make that transformative journey to interrupt intergenerational poverty is through those holistic services and complementary services. Because if you think about it, the folks that come to us come from really tough situations of being abjectly homeless, living in a car, domestic violence, shelter, and all the challenges that come with that, right? That didn't happen overnight and that are very interrelated. Well, you're going to need equally interrelated, equally complicated, research-based services on site at one time to help interrupt that. And it is not easy. It's certainly not cheap, and it's not quick. But we've been doing this for 50 years, and we have the outcomes to show that this really does work for the single-parent family.
There are multiple Warren Village campuses all across Denver. Can you tell us about these different locations and the new one that just opened in Alameda?
Yeah, absolutely. And really, we have 4 locations that we provide services on. And the point is really about differentiation, because each family that comes to us is going to be in a slightly different place, right? It needs slightly different needs and be at a different point in their trajectory. So for example, First Step in Northwest Denver, we only serve single teenage parents. If you look at Gilpin, right, we serve any single parent, mom, dad, or even if a grandparent, if they have custody of their child. That program is modeled on a transitional housing basis. So that's a 2 to a 4-year program. And Alameda, we actually just moved in the first family yesterday, right, on our goal of 89 families by the springtime. That's going to be a slightly different model, right? Still have the Early Learning Center, still be 2-gen, but the folks there can stay a little bit longer. They may need, some different services that are going to be unique to Alameda, whether that's going to be physical or mental health. We'll meet them where they're at down there. And then out at Ivy Crossing, we don't own that property, but we really work with the apartment owner there to help folks who are close to being on the edge of homelessness, kind of keep them stabilized. We call it upstream impact.
You're celebrating 50 years of helping single-parent families in Denver. I mean, what does the journey of Warren Village look like over the past 50 years? Where did you start? What are some of the ways that you got to where you're at right now?
The journey actually began in the late 50s, right? So more than 50 years ago, with a small group of dedicated parishioners at a local church who came together, saw a problem, and started planning. And by 1969, they'd gotten their articles of incorporation and got a loan from the federal government, a $2 million loan, to build this 95-unit apartment complex across the street from where I am now. And they just had an audacious vision, right? And they were tenacious in the planning. And then they opened in 1974. And so from there, it has been evolution, right? Which has been great to expand, to add the Early Learning Center, to add mental health, to add multiple sites, right? Because we're constantly learning, we're constantly looking in the community for the need and better ways to serve. So our mission has been unwavering, but the way we do it has evolved because we're a learning organization and we want to improve as we go to meet the needs that are presented to us.
Could you tell me a success story, one that you hold on to that you think about often?
Yeah. There's one parent who came to us right when I got here, maybe 8 years ago, and came from out of state, living in absolute squalor with her children, but found us, tracked us down, got out here and moved in, spent 4 years with us, took advantage of every program we offer, the Early Learning Center, mental health, workforce, credentials, everything she could do, got her degree, and was able to move on to successively impressive and wonderful jobs that gave her greater income, greater stability, and most important for her, a future for her children. And they looked to her as a role model, and they looked to her as a success story. And that's what motivated her and kept her going. And now this woman comes to us and helps us with outreach and speaking opportunities, talking to the board, to our community. And she is my role model. And I have learned a great deal from this person.
So for those who are inspired to support your mission, how can they get involved?
That's the neat thing. We are, for 50 years, a community-based organization, and we rely on our community in many different ways. Volunteering on any of our locations, serving on a board committee, serving on an event committee, coming down and just helping out with babysitting, whatever it might be, could be an entryway, right? So folks can go to our website and find those volunteer opportunities. And obviously, we're a nonprofit, right? Over half of the revenues to run this organization comes from donations from individuals, from corporations, from foundations. So we obviously are definitely welcoming a financial investment. There's a donate button on our website, warrenvillage.org, that people can avail themselves of. So many different ways to get involved.
Ethan Hemming, thank you for being here. And thanks to everyone at Warren Village this year celebrating 50 years of helping single-parent families in Denver.
Thank you, Andrea.
Learn how to get involved or make a donation at warrenvillage.org. Again, warrenvillage.org to learn more. And we have a link for you in our show notes as well, so you are just a click away. Thank you for listening.
That's all for today here on CityCast Denver. If you enjoyed this show, why not take a minute to tell Paula Woodward about us? Rate the show wherever you get your podcasts and subscribe to our morning newsletter and learn more about us at denver.citycast.fm. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. See you later.